Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform, and a real pleasure to have Geoff Scott again. Geoff, this is twice in 3 months. Boy,
You're keeping better score than I am, Vinnie.
we did one with Peter Meyer end of
We
July.
did do one with Peter. And if people haven't heard that, they should go back and listen to that.
I wrote
Business as unusual.
But so thank you for it's my absolute honor to have you twice in a quarter.
Wow.
And talking about quarters, we're going to talk a lot about SAP today. But let's talk about Q2 and catch up on some of the your perceptions and what are you hearing from the ASUG membership? Start there.
So the Q2 earnings announcement from SAP was, to me, an interesting departure from what I'm used to thinking about as a standard earnings announcement, which is it's about earnings and financial performance and how are we doing compared to the guidance we gave to Wall Street. And in this particular earnings announcement, SAP's leadership spent a lot of time talking about product and pricing. And that caught me by surprise. And I didn't initially listen to the earnings announcement. I was guided to it by my team and others who said, you should take a listen. And I, being in the role I'm in, I started listening. I'm like, I got to make sure I understand this. So I literally was listening to it, and I had the transcript up on a computer screen so I could really decompose what was being said. And we wrote from an ASUG perspective, we're going all the way back to August. And on August the 7th, I wrote a piece, Vinnie, called We Will Clarify, Communicate SAP's Cloud Strategy for Our Community. There were 3 things I think I took away from that. And August 7th now feels like a distant memory. Number one, SAP made a very concerted comment about move to the cloud. And not just move to the cloud, but move to the cloud using Rise and Grow, right? That was number one. Number 2, generative AI is here. And if you want to use generative AI on an SAP platform, we've got something for you. It's going to cost you more. And then third, it's all about innovation, right? You have to innovate. If you don't innovate, you're behind. So you need to innovate, and these things will let you innovate. So what does that mean to the average SAP customer right now? I think for the ECC customer, it's somewhat of a consistent message. ECC customers know that ECC is becoming end of life. They know they need to make a move. This is a reminder to them that the clock is ticking, right? So I think if I'm an ECC customer, this shouldn't be terribly new news. I know I need to make a move. Perhaps the move I need to make is to Rise, right? So that might be the new piece of it. If I'm in the middle of a business case, I need to think about Rise. Okay. If I am a S4 customer and I didn't go on Rise, I did an early adoption. I went early in my career. You might be saying to yourself, do I now need to go to Rise? I thought I was done and I need to go to Rise. And I don't know the answer to that. I've heard multiple different views from SAP on that. Christian Klein, in his comments in Bremen, Germany at DSAG's annual Congress a little while ago, said we will leave no customer behind, and I believe him on that. So I think that part of this needs some clarification. So for customers that are S4 customers but not on Rise, I would say hold tight. Let's get through some of this and see where that goes. Innovation.
It's a much shorter putt than for ECC customers, right? Since they're already in S4.
Maybe. I think the longer you have been now, I think one of the differences about the modern ERP is we used to measure these upgrades in 5-10 year cycles. And when you think about some of the early S4, there are actually some early versions of S4. And I don't get these right. So I'm not gonna name them for fear that people will call me out for not getting it right. But earlier versions of SAP are almost at end of life of S4. And customers who are on those versions know that they've been communicated. They know they need to do an upgrade. Theoretically, those upgrades are easier to do. However, they still require work. They still require effort to be expended. They have to have a project around. You have to do testing. You may need to bring your integrator in to help you with that. So there's still work to be done. those early versions likely, Vinny, are not the end state goal of, I think, where this is all going. They're not clean core. They're probably still relatively heavily customized.
Okay,
And so they're, yeah.
It's not just a
right
product ERP product issue. It's more of the state they're in.
So pull all that back, take it all, boil it down, whatever, level it up. What's the big news here? If I'm a CIO today and I'm a CEO, a former CIO, what is this all telling me? And it's not just SAP, Vinny, that I think is saying this. I think it's all of the software vendors are moving in lockstep around this, right? So if you could say, I don't believe SAP's vision, I want out. So what do? I go to XYZ vendor. I think you're going to hear the same thing. What is it? This is a cloud-based world. Well, you need to be on the cloud.
Right? I mean, NetSuite was born in 97, so shouldn't be surprised 25 years later.
Right. So, some of these things, the innovation cycles are that long. I think there is a foundational disconnect between what the software vendors are saying your innovation cycle should be and what the average customer can actually accomplish. They are very different, right? So number one, cloud-based world, no surprise there. At least hope not. Number two, it's probably a SaaS-based world, right? So ergo, cloud and SaaS are the same thing. So software as a service. The future things I buy should probably be software as a service. And number three, if I want to be on the forefront, the leading edge, the bleeding edge of innovation, and there's a lot of argument that you don't, but there's some that do, low to no customization, right? I think ultimately that's where this is all heading. I don't think that that's necessarily bad, right? I'm not going to tell you that inherently I'm radically opposed to that. It is somewhat of a nirvana, simplified view of the future. I understand that, but I don't think it's all bad, right? Because ultimately, everything is driving. I mean, look at ChatGPT, look at generative AI, some of the topics you also want to touch in today. So all of this is going to bleed together, right? Look at the adoption cycle of generative AI, right? How fast, November of last year, it popped up. No one saw it coming. Here it comes. It's here. And the adoption goes skyrocketing up, right? And it's wobbled since, but wow, it was one of the fastest adopted technology products in history. I think that is a signal. If I'm a CIO and I'm watching this, that's a massive signal, right? That technology is moving faster and faster and faster. The only way for me to maintain my edge and be ahead of the curve is to be in a SaaS-based world that's on the cloud, low customization, so I can do this as quickly as possible. I think for most companies who are SAP customers, especially as they grow in revenue size and employees, that is a massively tall order for them to accomplish, if not impossible.
Here's my I wrote a blog around the same time as you did.
Yep.
And it was I was like, I made the point that NetSuite was born in 97. I made the point that SAP has been telling people ECC is end of life, right? I wrote in one of my books, not 12 years ago, where I said people are ring fencing their core ECC with a bunch of cloud applications. And the big companies have 50, 100 of those surround applications in the cloud, right? I also made the point that it's not surprising a lot of the vertical edge applications that SAP has been releasing in healthcare and a few other areas, battery management, are in the cloud. They're not being released in an on-premise world, right? So to me, it's like there are so many clues. If you didn't see this coming, I'd be shocked.
You and I referenced the last time you and I spoke with Peter Meyer, and the book that you and Peter wrote along with, I think, Thomas Saueressig, if memory serves.
Yep.
You speak to this, right? I mean, you're talking about some of these very facts. And however, right? I mean, technical debt is real. And the innovation cycles inside these organizations are in vastly different timelines. So, you know, I think we're in for a long period of adjustment. And I think, you know, most likely most organizations will continue to be significantly behind the curve because catching up is a massively time-intensive, capital-intensive, money-intensive process that most organizations don't have the patience, the wherewithal to do. So they'll figure out how to keep moving, but it'll be at a very different pace. I believe while SAP, NetSuite, Workday, Oracle can say these things, they also need to come to the table with tools and techniques that help the customers realize this vision.
No question. I mean, you know, this is something that you know, they just magically expect systems integrators to do it. And I'm seeing systems integrator proposals. You and I have talked this many times, just exploding. And you go,
exploding.
What part of automation and Gen AI can't you apply to this labor-intensive market?
Right. So I believe that the opportunity for AI, for SAP specifically, and the rest, by the way, because this is not unique to SAP, is can you please use those tools to make your software easier to implement, faster time to value, help us understand how we configure it in the most expeditious way at the highest quality levels. Make sure that our QA is accurate so we aren't making mistakes and having data challenges when we go live. You have to come to the table, software companies, with that degree of accountability, and then we might have a fighting chance.
Even more, Scott, Geoff, I would say, start being tough on your ecosystem.
Yeah.
And you know, we've done 1 million ERP projects in the last 20 years. There are countless test scripts. There are countless data conversion plans. There are countless configurations available. Okay, 1 million of them. Not all of them are clean. Not all of them worked out well, but a significant percentage of them build an LLM with some of that and generate that rather than have a team going start afresh every single time, guys. I mean, come on. So
the metaphor, Vinnie, that I think about is your phone, your digital transformation device, either your Android, Google phone, or your iPhone, right? And if we were asked as customers to mandatorily update our phones every year, and when we updated the phone, we'd have to go back in and manually reload every single app, and we would have to retype in or reload every single contact, every single email, everything that's in there, all the configuration would need to be done from scratch. We wouldn't do it. But the fact that that's been all automated for us makes that upgrade process seamless. It's not perfect, right? It's not perfect, but it makes it more seamless. For some reason, we believe in the enterprise app space, we don't have to do that. Now, I have another ask of the folks who create the software that runs on my desktop that does things like spreadsheets and analysis and document processing and email processing. Could you please not break them every time you upgrade them? So, I appreciate and applaud your features, but your features tend to break when I need them, when I need your app the most, and I need your feature the least. Right. This always happens to me, Vinnie, when I'm preparing for board meetings and I'm trying
I'm supposed to be the pessimistic analyst. You're supposed to be the optimist. Let's start talking about
I know
the most exciting thing in the world
let's move
right
on.
now. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Let's talk about Joule.
Let's talk about Joule. Let's talk about AI. Yeah, let's do it. Hey, we have to start somewhere, right? I happen to believe that we are not going to get, there is a lot of this generative AI piece in the enterprise technology space. that looks really interesting, looks very promising, but it needs practical application and practical use, and it will get better from there. So I applaud SAP for coming out with some things to get the conversation started. Will we end up here? No. I mean, I think about the early days of the internet, Vinny. I remember back, you and I have enough, miles under our tires that we remember the old, modem you used to plug in.
I'm 17.
Right?
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, I know. And the early days of the internet did not support what the internet is today, right? The full motion video, pictures. I mean, remember how long it took to paint a screen, right? And so I think that's the beginning of generative AI. I think it'll move fast, but I appreciate that SAP is moving Joule out, and it's a very crowded, busy marketplace, Vinny. There's a lot of people doing things. And, it's very confusing.
Geoff, I had a really neat conversation last week, purely on AI with a gentleman, and I said the use cases, the very different use cases, right? Application vendors are talking about, hey, look, our data is book of record, so it's highly sanitized. We can do structured use cases in HR and finance and procurement, back office. If you talk to the hyperscalers, their big killer app is developer productivity, DevOps productivity. They think that's going to be the big, low code is finally going to become real by giving.
Great.
Yeah. If you talk to consulting firms, they're like, well, applying ChatGPT to my content is the killer app. So that's just those three groups, right? Now, when you go into the application world, I mean, I'm seeing literally hundreds of use cases, because it's not just the back office. You're seeing some from the CRM area, you're seeing some from the operational area, and so on. And so, as somebody called it, they're going through AI fog. The board is seeing all these hundreds of use cases. And what they're finding is the HR and financial, the Joule type use cases are actually low value, low payback.
I think they are, right? But you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. So
from an ASUG point of view, we think about AI, and we want to be careful as ASUG. We aren't the user community that jumps out in front and starts making wild accusations or wild statements. So I think we're pretty close now. We have an internal team that is working on the first set of content and guidance on this. And we wanted to take time. We wanted to watch this unfold a little bit. We think about things, and one of the things we're talking about is that in order for AI to have, generative AI, we've been around it. And the thing is, Vinny, AI has been around forever, right?
Sure.
We're talking about this next thing, generative AI. The data behind it has to both be accurate and relevant, right? Oh, and
auditable. And auditable.
Well, that would be accurate, right? Auditable will be accurate in our definition. And it has to have sufficient volume to be able to matter. So if you say volume, accuracy, and relevancy, and you think about the modern ERP, those are pretty tall orders of magnitude to hit. Most SAP customers struggle with keeping their master data in check. It's a big deal. And through no fault of their own, master data is hard. How much that's in your ERP is really relevant to you today? Do you really want to have your artificial intelligence model giving you answers based on products that you don't even have anymore, but they're still in your ERP?
Yep.
Right? So is the way your business runs today, could you have predicted that 3 years ago based on the data that you had 3 years ago? If the answer is we are so different that we couldn't, then you run a high risk. And I'm working at a very high level here. That doesn't mean that there's not use cases underneath.
Given how amazingly book business is unusual, right? How volatile the last 3 or 4 years have been.
Right. So do you want to put all that into an algorithm or have AI generate an algorithm for you? And you're going to go, that's it. Perfect. Here we go. I think there's a high degree of risk. So I think you go into these with your eyes wide open. I think they're very interesting. They demand research into, they demand careful tuning, but I wouldn't just go, right? I would be very careful about playing with these utilities and making sure that when you give them out. See, here's the thing that I think about, Vinnie. When we talk about this idea that, you know, potentially, you could free up 20, 30% of productivity. And I think where people go is, well, I could probably get rid of, pick a number, 15, 20% of my workforce. Oh, that sounds interesting. But the people you're going to get rid of might be your more expensive ones. And you'll leave your lesser expensive ones there. But they're the ones where the data has to be good enough that when they give the answer, it's right, because they don't have the skills to know when the data is wrong, because you may have taken those individuals out of the mix. So I think there's a real risk that efficiency is not realized, because what you've actually done is, you know, cut off your nose to spite your face, because that data, you know, I think you still need critical thinking, right, in order to get there. The other piece that I think is interesting about generative AI is, what is the data that's missing, right? In order, who are the people that are going to benefit today from all of this? The hyperscalers, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who are
have the compute cycles,
have the compute cycles, right? And whether the information, the answer is right or wrong, they still make their revenue. So, and by the way, in order to get to those right answers, you almost have to digitize everything, Vinnie, because if you're missing it, the algorithm will never know. So who does that benefit? The hyperscalers, because the more data you put in, I mean, talk about, you know, digital transformation on steroids. AI, generative AI requires it, because if it isn't in there, you can't make the decision. How many people in your enterprise today are making massive decisions? How much of that decision is based on what they see in a system versus what they know through experience? Your average person working on a plant floor, your average person loading a trailer truck, your average person working on a product. If a big chunk of that knowledge is sitting up here and it's not in that computer, your algorithm, what Gen AI tells you, is very likely to be directionally right, but not accurate.
You know,
my point of view. I might be wrong.
No, I've been saying, to me, the killer app that comes out of Gen AI is actually previous versions of AI. I'm seeing, seriously, I'm seeing a lot more interest in taking demand forecasting, which has been around for a while, right? But there are so many more data streams available now. I like to use the example of Costco. I wrote a case study on them 5 years ago about their food court. You know, they don't want to have too few hot dogs, but if a hot dog is not sold in an hour, they have to throw it away. They have a policy, right? So getting it just right is fairly important to them. And they had a bunch of point of sale stuff. They were including weather data. They were starting to include gas price data, because they find that if their price is 20 to 25 cents lower than competition, a lot of people come for the gas. And they come for the gas, they're going to go into the store. And so the number of streams that are available since in the last 5 years, customer sentiment analysis, economic data, sports event data, and all that has grown. So I'm seeing a resurgence in people saying, let's take what we did a few years ago and turbocharge it with a lot more data that we didn't have, right? That to me,
that's amazing.
That to me is exciting.
But that is very exciting. But that requires you to have skill sets inside your organization that can perform those analyses. Those are not analyses that you do with an average skill set. Those require a lot of sophistication. And if this can help them iterate through faster, I think, to your point, and you can look at it and go, yep, that makes sense, or no, that causality is not correct, then you're great. I think there's a lot of really cool use cases of what this stuff will do.
I worry though.
I don't buy into the early hype that 30%, there'd be 30% productivity increase. So another example I'll give you. I'm a big. You write for a living. I write for a living. Grammarly is tremendous. I use it all the time. The problem with Grammarly is it's on all the time. and it doesn't understand when I'm writing an email to a colleague or whether I'm writing, a Word document that's going out to tens of thousands of people. And I tend to now have a very Pavlovian response to red squigglies underneath my words. So, and I don't happen to now differentiate between whether I'm sending someone to a colleague or sending out to big. So red squiggly must fix. So when I'm writing an internal email to someone on my team, is it really necessary for me to make sure all the commas are in there? They're in the right place? Probably not. And so I might be picking up a lot more efficiency in Grammarly because my writing is better, but it's also I'm losing efficiency because I don't know when to say stop. The other thing that I've noticed about Grammarly and all these other tools is they're very good at making me a pretty good average writer, right? An average. So it improves my ability to convey average prose, but it doesn't allow me to be me. We're in the process of writing as ASUG a 2030 vision statement of what we as a user community want to be in the year 2030. And it's written with a particular style. It's written in a conversational style it's a little unique. Grammarly hates it. Absolutely hates it. I mean, it's like,
But
you're like, no. We're being intentional here, right? And and I love it. It's a great thing.
Forget Grammarly. I'm fascinated. You're looking 7 years out. I'd love to hear what you want to do in 2030.
Totally different. You'll have to have me back in 2 months.
Absolutely, we'll come back to that.
I still have a board and a lot of employees going, huh?
Well,
so
but
again, coming back to that, it does a good job of driving you to the middle. I don't know.
Let's talk about communities a little bit more.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, you mentioned DSAG earlier, right? Talk to me about, seems very, very culturally different. You guys seem a little more collaborative. Contrast your approach in DSAG, because clearly, from an SAP's perspective, the mid-market in Germany is hugely important, and DSAG has a huge influence there, right? So contrast what you hear from them versus what you're hearing from the ASAG customer base.
We tend to operate as ASUG, and by the way, they're both styles work. If you get, I happen to know many of the senior leaders and the board chair of DSAG very well. We talk to each other all the time. And when you get us together, we tend to see things through a very similar lens. We just happen to articulate it differently. And I think that's okay, right? I think that's okay. There's some people that appreciate DSAG's style, and there's some people that appreciate ASUG style. Both are effective. We tend to, inside of ASUG, we have deep relationships with all of the senior leaders at SAP. We talk to them, the board of ASUG, we talk to them all the time. It's a trusted, deep relationship built over 30 years. It's a relationship that requires immense amount of care. We use that in order to let them, and that trust that we've developed allows us to communicate very frankly, very specifically, to drive change and to make sure that SAP is hearing the customer voice.
But you're not as public about it.
We are not, because here's the difference. In our view, as soon as we make that public, SAP becomes, as any organization does, becomes incredibly defensive, right? It's your natural. It just same as, if I'm sitting in a room with you and I are sitting, there's people listening today, but if you and I are just having a private conversation together, right? And no one's, and it's not going to be public. You and I might have a very different exchange than if there's 500 people listening, right? If I say to you, hey, Vinnie, I'm going to ask you all these really hard questions. There's 500 people listening and they are waiting to attack. Your answers are going to be very different. That's the way we view it, right? We are not public about it. We come at it and by the way, that's not just a Geoff Scott, CEO of ASUG for 9 years, stylistic thing. The board of directors also feels the same way. We don't issue press releases. We will talk to SAP privately and we'll say, this is what we'd like to see happen. This is what we'd like. This is what we believe is in the best interest of our customers. Will you please listen to the customer base? We won't out them in public. It isn't. We don't see that as a terribly productive way to do it.
Whereas DSAG can be, what's the right word? Confrontational sometimes in public.
Yeah, and it seems to me that they thrive on that a little bit more. And there are people in your analyst community, not you, but others, who are critical of our ASUG style. So you should be more combative. You should put out press releases. You should hold them account. We do behind the scenes. And the reason that you're saying that is because you want the clicks. Because if we do that, you get to write the article. You know, it's social media, right? People kind of tend to gravitate towards that. Here's what I would say. My most important job as ASUG is to celebrate the 51 years that SAP has been in business, serving its customers and creating amazing software, and take that 51 years and make sure SAP is there for the next 50, right? My job is to advise them, counsel them, make sure they are relevant and reflecting the customer needs for the next 50 years, because I guarantee you, there is no one in the ASUG community who wants to deal with an SAP that's not around in 50 years. No one wants that project. And so my job is to work with SAP to make sure the customers stay in the room, not demonstrate to them and show them forcefully where the exits are.
Well, since you raised the
How about
50, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Since you raised the 50-year scenario,
yeah.
First of all, I'm really pleased you're looking at 2030. Can't wait to see that. But let's talk about the
I do need to show it to you, because I'd like to get your constructive feedback of it. And again, same thing, right? I'm going to show it to you. If you said, "Hey, show it to me," and now I'm going to go and write a press release about how bad it is, I'm probably not going to show it to you. I'm very sensitive.
Let's talk about the 50 years.
Yeah,
because we're looking at such a crazy world right now. I mean, we're looking at 50-year wars.
Ooh.
Few of them around the world, right? And like you said, COVID kind of changed everything.
Yep.
The business as unusual book, we looked at COVID, Ukraine, climate change urgency, and massive digital transformations. And now we've got all the Middle Eastern issues, right? Given all this, one thing that I'm scratching my head, I'm hearing a lot of Wall Street analysts tell every software vendor, hey, GPUs are expensive. You may not even get an allotment of GPUs. Make sure you charge a premium for your AI. And I'm going, seriously, are they in sync with the pressures that customers are going through right now? What are you hearing from the ASUG customer base in terms of pricing, economics, in general?
One of the things, that's a great question. One of the things that I have said to SAP is your customer relationships are measured in decades, not quarters. Ultimately, Wall Street will be happy if the customers are happy. Now, that might not be true quarter to quarter, but ultimately, you're in business to service your customers, not Wall Street. If you start to service Wall Street over your customers, you are dancing with the devil. The devil will never be satisfied. You will never see the end of it, and you will find yourself in a vicious cycle that you cannot escape from. Wall Street likes to have very simplistic tags. And I think to SAP's, in my view, this is easy for me to say because I'm not an institutional investor. SAP, you have to be a cloud company. If you're not a cloud company, you don't get multiples. Well, is SAP really a cloud company? Should it be a cloud company, or should SAP be a customer company that is helping customers achieve something really important, which is being their business nervous system? And that is incredibly important. And if they do that really, really well, I think they'll get the multiples. I think when you lose that focus, it's a really hard road to navigate. I do believe if you are a pragmatic leader, you understand what's around the corners, you're trying to make sure you have a composite view, you are prepared for what's coming ahead of you. If you're not doing that, you should do that to make sure you understand, because the ones that can succeed in today's world of disruption understand where most of that will come from, so they can react to it when it does. And it makes them that much more prepared that when something comes out that they don't recognize, they're better prepared for it. So there's a lot in this world, Vinnie, to be proud of. Generative AI and where it's taking us is an amazing opportunity.
The book that I wrote for Peter and Thomas, Business as Unusual, is chock full of innovation. And I had to step back and I go, I cannot believe in the last 3 years, with all the dismal, scary scenarios we've had, so much innovation's been going on, right? And so I think it brings out, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right? Human beings are amazingly resilient. So
I think innovation born of adversity is probably the way that a lot of this gets done, because it is a way to kind of get the masses going. I don't think it's a bad thing. And to your point, innovation also does take concentrated effort and thought and leadership, right? It doesn't just drop out of the sky one day. Oh, I innovated, right? You are changing things. Change has resistance to it. You have to overcome that resistance, and I think that all makes sense.
So let's end on a final question. I get to ask the last final question.
Yes, sir.
The Rangers or the Diamondbacks?
Great question. I was hoping for the Phillies, and I didn't have that succeed.
I wrote something yesterday that said the home field disadvantage. Every one of the 14 games went to the visitors. How statistically improbable is that?
I don't bet on baseball, and some of my colleagues are much more fervent baseball fans than I am. Diamondbacks.
Well, okay, we'll see how good the prediction is.
I'm in the throes of college football season, so I'm thinking about the Georgia Bulldogs and Michigan and Ohio State and Florida. I got to come around to baseball.
Alabama doesn't look good, but they seem to win in spite of everything.
My daughter goes to Georgia, Vinnie.
I know.
She's been to two collegiate championships games out of the 4 years that she's been there. I'd like it to be 3. So she will be one of the rare people that goes to college at a university where 3 of the 4 years they've been in the national championship game. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, that's a positive note to end on. Thank you again, Geoff.
Thank you, my friend.